Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's time for another recent reads. I got 3 more books I want to talk about in this video. I already mentioned these books in the last recent reads at the end of the video, so here it is. The first one I want to talk about is Marilyn and Me by Jimin Lee. So this book was originally written in Korean, translated into English by Kim. This book also has an alternate title. It's called The Starlet and the Spy, if I'm not mistaken. Jimin Lee is a Korean, South Korean screenwriter and also an author. And reading this book, I certainly feel like it has that kind of drama vibe. This is a historical fiction, and I think that the premise sounds really interesting. So basically, there are 2 timelines in the book. So the first timeline occurs sometime in 1954, which is sometime after the Korean War. It is set in Korea. And in 1954, Marilyn Monroe went to Korea to entertain the American troops stationed there. And so the main character, Alice J. Kim, she has been assigned to work as the interpreter for Marilyn Monroe. And because of that, she has this rare opportunity to interact with this world-famous superstar. And at the same time, we also learned that Alice J. Kim is someone who has a particular experience. She has had some traumatic experience because of the Korean War. And so the other timeline in this book takes place sometime in late 1940s, which is like before the Korean War. Where we learn more about what happened to Alice at the time. Basically, there was a love triangle involving 2 men. And we also learn what would happen later to Alice during the war itself. And there was a particularly harrowing event that the book is setting up towards for its reveal at the end. But throughout this book, we are given hints that, oh my gosh, there was something that happened to Alice during the war. What is it? What is it? What is it? So we kept on being given this kind of clues as to what really happened to her that caused her to feel so traumatized by from this war. And so this book is a lot of things. It is about the war experience. It is about Alice's personal realization about her own station in this world as a woman. It's about her romance, the love triangle with these 2 men as well. And it gets complicated because these 2 men happen to be involved in the war in ways that are kind of sinister. And then there's Marilyn Monroe. So it's a lot. But this book is actually quite short, and when you look inside, the font size is also quite big, which means that this book is really short. It's so short that me, a slow reader, could actually read it like within 2 to 3 days. So it was a very quick read. But and I kind of appreciate the fact that it was a quick read, because it meant that once I get to the end, I was able to have that satisfaction of finishing a book. But at the same time, because the pace of this book was very fast, it also left me feeling a little bit unsatisfied with the story, with how the characters and themes are explored. I feel like this book could have been better if this book was written as a longer piece of work, which could make it a bit more epic, considering the scope of this novel, the setting that it has, what was actually happening at the time, the Korean War. A longer a longer book would have allowed the characters to be fleshed out even more. Because as of now, it feels like many of these elements, the love triangle, the war trauma, the Marilyn Monroe's inclusion, all of these things feel kind of randomly squished in together, and so they don't really. I think that they don't mix very well in here because they're not given the chance to actually blend into one another. So yeah, that's one thing. And another is the inclusion of Marilyn Monroe herself. And this is the part that I find kind of interesting because the title is Marilyn and Me, and I think in the original Korean title it's something like I and Marilyn. So basically Marilyn is already referenced in the title, even for the original work. And in this book, Marilyn Monroe is described as someone who is like this global superstar who has this other, kind of otherworldly presence. Like she's just so famous, so out there that she feels like a totally foreign entity when she exists in the same room as the main character, as the other Korean characters in this book. And the characters themselves definitely reference this fact. They definitely reference like how big she is, the stature that Marilyn Monroe has as a superstar, which is kind of interesting because that makes sense. It's logical. But at the same time, me as the reader, I feel like I can't help but feel like the way she is written into this book feels kind of gimmicky because she doesn't feel like a character in this book, even though she is technically a character, but she doesn't really feel like a character that drives this book. Marilyn Monroe just sort of enters as she has a longer screen time than what a cameo would have, but her function feels like a cameo, if that makes sense. She interacts with our main character, which is like basically half of what's going on in the sort of current timeline, the 1954 timeline. And it is through this interaction that I feel like the intention was that to show how this interaction allows our main character Alice to sort of process the troubles that she's facing, regarding her lovers, regarding her war trauma, all of those things. And there is an attempt to sort of draw a parallel between Alice, a war survivor, and Marilyn Monroe, this global superstar, which I think feels a little bit twee because it just doesn't work very well. Like the attempt at drawing a comparison between these two women, it falls short. And that's why I also think that if this book is a bit longer, maybe we can have more time to allow these women to have their interaction feel a bit more organic, like to see how their supposed interaction could evolve over time, which would eventually possibly form into something that some kind of bond between these two women who comes from different worlds. So yeah, I feel like Marilyn Monroe's inclusion in this book, as it is right now, it feels kind of superfluous. It doesn't drive the story, it doesn't drive character development, and she's just sort of there. So there's this kind of like gimmicky feeling tied towards this character. So I give this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. It is something that one can read, like, I don't know, maybe as an airport read or commuting read, because it is quick. And I can certainly feel the sincerity of the author in this book, but at the same time, I I'm just not feeling the story itself. I feel like it could have been much more, much deeper. I also don't like the fact that how that particular harrowing event in Alice's life during the war is being used as the big reveal at the end, because when the book does that, it sort of relies on the shock value that that event can offer readers, and I feel like that is a bit cheap, because I'm more interested in seeing how Alice, the main character, deals with the aftermath, like the psychological aftermath of that event happening to her during the war. I much prefer with the what now question of for the main character, and not so much about what happened. Like, okay, so we know that happened, and it was revealed at the end, but what now? What will happen to her? What will happen to the main character? That is what I want to see, but I didn't really see much of that. So yeah, interesting book, but didn't really feel, it didn't really grab me. So moving on to the second one. This is also a very short read. This is by Tommy Wieringa, and he's a Dutch author. This book was originally written in Dutch. This is called The Death of Murat Idrissi, and this book was translated into English by Sam Garrett. In this book, we follow two Dutch young women of Moroccan descent. Let's see, I kind of forgot what their names were. One of her is named Ilham, and another one is named Thuraya. So basically, these two women, they travel to Morocco, and in Morocco they have a tour guide whom they are quite sort of somewhat acquainted with, and this tour guide leads them towards a family who is seeking assistance from anyone, basically. And it just so happened that these two Dutch women happen to be traveling around, and they feel like these women could act as the giver of this assistance for this family. So basically what this family wants is that they hope they could have one of the sons to be given to be smuggled into Europe, so that the son could travel across the border and make a living in Europe illegally. And of course, these two women are just kind of like hesitating about the whole thing, but they would eventually relent when they see how pleading the mother in this family is, and so they continue with the plan, they proceed with it, but then sometime in the middle, something horrible happens, and the story takes off from there. And I feel like this book, it has an outlandish but also somewhat realistic plot line, and I think it's partly because of how while we're reading the events of what's going on in this book, we are constantly being given references into the background of these main characters. So we got Ilham and Thuraya, these women who are now Dutch citizens. Their parents came from outside the Netherlands, and they immigrated to Netherlands like sometime before. So basically, these two women, they grew up in the Netherlands, but at the same time, because of their ethnicity, they don't feel like they really belong in the Netherlands. Like there's a bit of that part of themselves that just don't feel like they fit in, and so they try to just kind of like travel to their home country, and then even then they don't really feel like any kind of strong attachment with their home country. So they feel like kinds of characters that are neither here nor there, which to me is an interesting theme to look at, especially when it comes to stories related to identity and race and nationality. So they are faced with this kind of like moral dilemma, whether or not they should help this family to do something illegal, which could possibly get them in trouble as well. But at the same time, part of the motivation that this book shows us, the motivation of that causes these women to do the things that they do, ultimately relates back to who they are as a person and how they feel with their own self, how they feel about about their current position in the world. And there's a very, I think the way that they come into the way that they reach this decision is written quite believably and organically. I also enjoy how this book, even though it contains some very dark elements, it is also written with a tinge of black humor as well, which kind of makes the tone to be kind of interesting and varied. And despite it being a short book, I feel like it has it sufficiently conveyed what it wanted to say, especially regarding the kind of like the so-called journey of the main characters, these two women, in this entire ordeal. So I thought it was an interesting book. There is this kind of like part of my reader's mind that feel like, what if this book is written a bit longer? I mean, that would have been much more interesting, right? Because I don't think I can get enough. I mean, I could get enough, but I guess in the context of this book, I feel like I would love to see more about Thuraya and Ilham's exploration of their own identity within the context of them dealing with this particularly unpleasant experience that happened to them during this trip. And if it, let's say if the hypothetical longer book still maintains kind of like the consistent tone and the pace, I think it would have been a very interesting book. But yeah, again, like I said, I feel like even though this book is short, I feel like it has managed to say what it wanted to say, and the way it ended, I was fine with it. So I gave this one somewhere between 3.5 and 4 out of 5 stars. It's an interesting book, definitely recommend it. So the third one I want to talk about is The Woman in the Purple Skirt by Natsuko Imamura. All of the books that I've been talking about in this video are short books, and I gotta say it has something to do with the fact that the year is ending, and I was like, oh my gosh, let's read many short books and get our numbers up. Not that the numbers are really important to me, but at that time it was just kind of amusing to see the numbers going up, like the final attempt at hyping up the numbers. It feels like what I experienced when I was working in a manufacturing plant before. Like before the deadline, we were like ramping up production, and oh my gosh, let's get the production output up before the deadline. But anyway, back to this. This is also a quick read. I forgot to mention the translator for this book is Lucy North, and this book was originally written in Japan. in Japan. This book was originally written in Japanese, translated into English. And this is probably, out of all three, the quickest that I've read. I started this book like at about 2 p.m. on a particular day, and then I ended it on, I ended it at 9 p.m. So just a little bit over 6 hours, because it is a short book, but at the same time it is also an interesting book, and even though I read it very quickly, I didn't feel like I missed out so much. I didn't feel like it was hollow, like how certain quick reads could feel. So this book apparently was quite successful, at least critically. It won the Akutagawa Prize in Japan, I think, and so I was kind of intrigued to see what the whole thing is about with this novel. So in this novel, we see the appearance of two women. So the main character is a woman who calls herself the woman in the yellow cardigan. And the woman in the yellow cardigan, this book is set in Japan, she would notice that very regularly that there is another woman who would often sit at the same bench, at the same park, eating the same cream bun. And this is the woman that she refers to as the woman in the purple skirt. And apparently, she's not the only one in the area who notices the woman in the purple skirt. Other people in the areas, like the kids, the adults who live in the area, also notices the existence of this mysterious the woman in the purple skirt. And she's not mysterious in a way that she's like she has this kind of like aura of, this ominous aura surrounding her or whatnot, but she's just kind of like a very normal person who does things like really routinely. She would have her cream bun, she would sit on the same bench at that park, and all that. And then the woman in the yellow cardigan becomes very fascinated by her. She, because according to her, the woman in the purple skirt would remind her of different women in her life, both that she knew personally and also women that she does not know personally, like celebrities. And at this point of reading this novel, I started to think that what if this woman in the yellow, what if this woman in the purple skirt sort of represents like a composite of the women that the woman in the yellow cardigan is, that she knows. But even that kind of like, even that expectation by me just sort of falls apart when the story moves forward. What happens later is that the woman in the yellow cardigan would lure the woman in the purple skirt through a series of machinations, so that the woman in the purple skirt would work in the same hotel as her as a housekeeper. And the story continues to progress from there. We see how the woman in the yellow cardigan tries to get closer to the woman in the purple skirt, and we are still left wondering why she's so interested in the woman in the purple skirt. Like, what is going on with this lady in the yellow cardigan? Like, what's up with purple skirt that she's really interested in her, right? And it doesn't even feel like it's some kind of romantic attachment or whatnot, but there is this really strong interest that feels kind of unhinged and very voyeuristic. And it gets so voyeuristic to the extent that this yellow cardigan lady actually knows much of purple skirt's life. Like, she would know her routine, she would know like her work schedule in the past, like sometimes she's working, sometimes she's not. She would know where she lives and all that. So it's all kind of stalkery, but it doesn't even feel like it's it doesn't even feel like we really know what the purpose of her being this stalkery, you know what I mean? And that is part of the reason why this book intrigued me so much, because I don't know why things kind of happen in here, but I feel like there is a reason that maybe at this moment I do not think of, but maybe sometime in the future, next year, next week, next month, or in 10 years, I would begin to realize, oh, maybe this is why, you know, certain things happen in this book. So yeah, it is that kind of it is that kind of feeling where you think something is there, but you don't know if it's there or not. Like I was just like really in the dark while I was reading this book. I didn't really know what to expect, and I don't know what I should make of it once I get to the end. Now there's something that happens in the end that sort of changes the tone a little bit, and I really like it when that happens, because towards at least like 3/4 into this book, there is this kind of like, you know, this unhinged tone, this weird stalkery vibe that you're getting from this book. This strange parasocial interaction that Yellow Cardigan Lady has in regards to Purple Skirt Lady. But towards the end, we are sort of being dragged and crashed to reality. Suddenly the story becomes a bit more grounded. I'm not gonna say what really happened towards the end, but it really changes the tone. The focus is now on the Yellow Cardigan Lady, and it kind of informs us on why she has been doing certain things that she has been doing. It also maybe partially informs us on what's really going on in this whole novel. And yeah, that is the part that I really like. Now, of course, I also feel like because of this book may seem opaque to some readers, especially readers who want to look for something that is like a breezy read, something that is easily digestible, something that is kind of like decisive in what it wants to convey. This book is not that. This book is just itself. It feels like a fever dream, you know? It doesn't have that kind of very obviously logical sequence of events. So it has that kind of dreamy quality. It's not dreamy in an ethereal way, it's dreamy in this like really random and mundane way. And that is the kind of dreaminess that I love, and that is why I enjoyed this book. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. If you are interested in this book, do give it a try, because I think it is really worth it. There is something, just a bit of a hint. I would say that there is something about this book that touches upon or acts as a social commentary on things such as loneliness, poverty, basically small element of commentary on women's lives, but it's kind of subtle. But this is something that I've also noticed with many Japanese works. Like there is this kind of subtlety that I originally, when I started reading more Japanese translated literature, that I find that I wasn't able to grasp. But I think over time I start to get the hang of it, and I feel like I enjoy it, you know. And maybe that was why I was able to enjoy this book as well. If I were to have read this book many years ago, let's say when I just started doing booktube, I might not enjoy this book as much as I do right now, which would have been a shame, but at least I read this book last year, a few days ago, and I was able to appreciate it more. So, do give this a try if you have if you have the opportunity. Anyway, that's all for all of the books that I have read. I actually have finished one more book in 2024, but I'm not going to talk about it in this recent reads. I will talk about it in the next one. So this is Blueprint by Theresia Enzensberger. This book was translated into English from German by Lucy Jones. And this book is an interesting one. It is set in 1920s Weimar, and we see a young woman who is trying to learn architecture at the university, but it is so difficult for her to study architecture because architecture is like a male-dominated it was a male-dominated field at the time, and as a woman it was difficult for her to penetrate that barrier. And this book is kind of like about her challenges in university, and there are other things as well that I will talk about in the next recent reads. Yeah, it's an interesting book. And I'm not going to list down all of my current reads here, because I have tons of them and I don't have much to say about like most of them at this moment. But I was thinking maybe I could do something like a current read spotlights, where I just talk about like a couple current reads that I find interesting. Maybe I found something new or worth talking about. It's something that's just kind of like nagging in my head, that and this is just an opportunity for me to like express it. So I got a couple of books here. So the first one I just kind of want to briefly mention is that I started reading Samuel R. Delany's Babel 17. This was a recommendation from Shannon of That's So Po. And I only started reading this book like 1 or 2 days ago, and I'm only in the first chapter. I just finished the first chapter, but I thought that the first chapter established some really interesting details. So this book has something to do with alien invasion. Apparently a bunch of aliens have been like attacking the Earth people, and then there have been a series of attacks, and what ties all these attacks together is this communication that sounds really foreign to the ears of these Earth people. And so an expert has been called in, and then this expert is also a poet, and she reveals in the first chapter that this communication is not a code, is a language. And I feel like we are starting to see language being explored in a science fiction book, and I think that is really interesting because I love languages. I like learning languages. I just find languages to be so fascinating. And, to come across a science fiction that is going to possibly explore language. Ooh! Sign me up. So I feel like I'm gonna, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this book. Like I can't say yet because I was still in the first chapter, but the first chapter was interesting. So I hope that I will like it. I have a good feeling about this one. Let me know if you have read this book. What do you think? Do you think I will like it? Another one that I just kind of want to mention. I also mentioned this one in the last recent reads. This is Swell by Ioanna Karystiani, a Greek author. This book was originally written in Greek, translated to English by Konstantinos Matsoukas. And I am I just reached like page 76 out of 240, and I'm moving really slowly with this book. I like the writing style. I find that the voice is very interesting, and there is a reveal that happened somewhere in page 70, around there. It is about a man who is quite reluctant to come back to land after spending like more than 10 years at sea. And his wife, his family are all wondering why is he like that. And page 70 just sort of reveals something about it. I like the domestic fiction element of this book. And I feel like the writing style is interesting because it plays around with language. It plays around with the sensory aspect of what language could offer. But at the same time, I also feel like I have to really focus on the writing, like super focus on the writing, like no listening to music on my earphones, no anxiety, no thinking about my unfinished thesis. I have to feel like, really clear in my head in order for me to fully appreciate the writing of this book. So yeah, I am slightly concerned that I'm not giving this book a fair treatment. It is one of those times in which I sincerely wish that I could have been a billionaire, and I don't have to think about anything. Maybe I could be a billionaire for like just 1 week just so that I could finish this book. But no, I don't think I want to be a billionaire. I think being a billionaire is like, what's the point? Anyway, let me know what you're reading at the moment. Let me know if you have read any of these books, and yeah, let me know how your day is going, and I'll see you again in a different one. Let me know if you want to be a billionaire. So yeah, take care. Thanks for watching. And yeah, bye.